The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the usual morning chatter. Representatives from dozens of worlds took their seats, adjusting translation devices and reviewing the day's agenda. The massive chamber, built to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes, stretched upward into a dome that showed the stars beyond. Ambassador Zethkari of the Veltar Confederacy slithered into his position at the senior council ring. His four eyes scanned the chamber with practiced ease, noting which species had arrived and which were running late. The Cretan were always punctual, their insect-like forms already arranged in perfect formation. The massive Gorvani had squeezed their bulk into the reinforced seating designed just for them. But something felt different today. Zethkari's gaze swept across the human section, and he paused. The curved row of seats marked with Earth's blue and green symbols sat completely empty. Not a single human representative was present. No Ambassador Chen with her careful notes. No Director Martinez with his endless questions about trade regulations. No Dr. Okafor with her medical updates from the Rim colonies. Strange, Zethkari muttered to himself. The humans were many things, but they were never late to council sessions. In the 12 years since they had joined the Galactic Council, they had maintained perfect attendance. Even when their proposals were voted down or their concerns dismissed, they always showed up. Other council members began to notice the absence. The Thylorian representative, a tall being with silver skin, leaned toward Zethkari. "Where are the humans today? Did they send word about being delayed?" Zethkari checked his communication device. Nothing from the human delegation. He sent a quick message to the council's administrative office asking for information about the human absence. The response came back within minutes, and it made Zethkari's stomach twist with unease. The humans had not requested leave. They had not reported any emergency. They had simply not appeared for today's session. Council Speaker Morveth, an ancient being whose species had founded the council 3,000 years ago, called for order. His voice echoed through the chamber's translation systems in dozens of languages. "We will begin today's session," Morveth announced. "I note the absence of the human delegation. We will proceed with the scheduled business." The first item on the agenda was a trade dispute between the Zerion Empire and the Altarian Commonwealth. Both sides presented their cases with the usual diplomatic language that said much while revealing little. The humans would normally have asked pointed questions about the impact on civilian populations and smaller trading partners. Today, no such questions came. During the break, Zethkari approached several other senior representatives. The consensus was simple. The humans were probably making some kind of statement. They had been increasingly vocal about being excluded from major decisions despite their growing contributions to council operations. "Let them sulk," said General Korvex of the Draconian Military Union. His reptilian features showed clear disgust. "They act like children when they don't get their way." Ambassador Lyrian of the Centauri Republic was less dismissive. "This isn't like them. Humans don't skip meetings. They show up and argue their points even when they know they'll lose." As the day continued, the absence of human voices became more noticeable. When the council discussed new mining rights in the Vega sector, no one raised concerns about environmental impact on the native wildlife. When trade route security came up, no one mentioned the increasing pirate attacks on humanitarian supply ships. When the budget for the Outer Rim aid programs was cut by 30%, no one spoke for the colonies that would lose critical support. By evening, Zethkari felt genuinely concerned. He sent direct messages to every human official he knew. None responded. He tried calling the human embassy complex on the council homeworld. The communication went to an automated message saying the offices were temporarily closed. That night, reports began filtering in from across council space. Human merchant ships had stopped appearing at their regular docking stations. Human medical teams working on plague-affected worlds had packed up and left without explanation. Human technicians maintaining the deep space communication arrays had simply walked away from their posts. The next morning brought more troubling news. Every human colony ship, every research vessel, every diplomatic courier had vanished from council-monitored space. It was as if humanity had simply decided to disappear. Council Speaker Morveth called an emergency session. The Great Hall felt different with the human section empty. The absence of their distinctive blue and green delegation flags created a visual gap that seemed larger than it should be. "We have confirmed reports," that human representatives and personnel have withdrawn from all council operations, Morveth announced. We have received no formal notification of this action. No explanation has been provided. General Korvac stood to address the chamber. This is clearly an attempt to manipulate the council through dramatic gestures. I propose we continue our business as usual. If the humans wish to return to civilized discourse, they know where to find us. Several other senior species agreed. The Veltar representative expressed relief that the council could now focus on serious matters, without constant human interference. The Zarian delegates suggested that human withdrawal might actually improve efficiency, but Ambassador Lyrian of the Centauri Republic raised a different concern. Has anyone checked on the status of human-operated facilities? They run significant portions of our communication networks, medical supply chains, and technical support systems. The question hung in the air like a weight. Most council members had never thought about the details of who actually kept their civilization running. They knew the grand political structures, the trade agreements, the military alliances. The everyday work of maintaining a galactic society was beneath their notice. Morveth assigned investigation committees to assess the impact of human withdrawal. The reports would take days to compile, but early indicators were already causing worry among council staff. The humans had been involved in far more operations than anyone realized. They served as translators between species with incompatible communication methods. They operated rescue ships in dangerous regions other species avoided. They maintained research stations in areas too hostile for most council members to consider inhabiting. As the second day without humans ended, some council members began to admit they felt uneasy. The humans had never threatened to leave. They had never demanded special treatment or made ultimatums. They had simply worked quietly, contributed steadily, and asked for fair consideration of their perspectives. Now they were gone, and no one knew why or where they had went. Zethkari spent that evening reviewing records of recent council votes. In the past year alone, the council had rejected human proposals for expanded medical aid to rim colonies, increased protection for trade routes serving smaller species, and environmental protections for newly contacted worlds. Each time, the humans had accepted the decisions with grace and continued their work. Perhaps that had been the problem. The humans made their objections known, but they never made threats. They never forced the issue. They just kept working and hoping the council would eventually see the wisdom in their suggestions. The thought struck Zethkari with uncomfortable force. Maybe the humans had finally stopped hoping. As he prepared for sleep, one more troubling question entered his mind. If the humans could disappear so completely and so quickly, what else might they be capable of that the council had never considered? The stars beyond his window seemed somehow less friendly than they had the day before. 3 weeks after the humans disappeared, the first real problems began to show themselves. Captain Voss of the Zerion trading vessel, Star Prophet, stared at his navigation display with growing frustration. The Orion trade route, normally busy with traffic, stretched empty before his ship. For the past 10 days, he had not seen a single human merchant vessel along the entire corridor. This was a serious problem. Human traders served as the backbone of the Orion route system. They carried goods between species that refused to deal directly with each other. They translated not just languages but cultural expectations and business practices. They knew which products were sacred to some species and forbidden to others. Without human intermediaries, trade between the Altarian Commonwealth and the Draconian territories had ground to a complete halt. The Draconians considered Altarian customs insulting, while the Altarians found Draconian directness offensive. Human traders had spent years building relationships with both sides, creating a system that worked despite the cultural differences. Now Captain Voss was trying to deliver a shipment of Altarian art crystals to a Draconian buyer, and he had no idea how to navigate the complex protocol requirements. His first attempt at direct communication had resulted in the Draconian trademaster declaring blood feud against his entire crew. On the other side of council space, Mining Director Calyx of the Cathara Consortium faced an even more immediate crisis. His company had built their entire operation around extracting rare elements from the cores of dying stars. The work required exposure to radiation levels that would kill most species within hours. Humans, for reasons no one fully understood, could survive in these environments far longer than anyone else. They wore special suits and worked in short shifts, but they could function in areas that would be instant death for Cathara workers. The dying star Ragnarok 7 had been their most productive site, generating elements essential for manufacturing faster-than-light drive components. Now the human crews were gone, and Calix stared at shutdown notices from 12 different mining operations. His company faced bankruptcy within months if they could not find a way to continue extraction. He had tried using automated systems, but they failed constantly in the extreme radiation environment. Only human technicians had been able to maintain and repair the equipment under such conditions. Calix sent desperate messages to other species, offering enormous payment bonuses for workers willing to take on the dangerous assignments. No one responded. The risks were simply too great for the potential rewards. Meanwhile, on the colony world of New Thessaly, Governor Praxon watched his medical supplies dwindle with each passing day. The Velnari plague had struck his world 6 months ago, and human pharmaceutical companies had been the only source of effective treatment. The plague affected only certain species, so most council members did not consider it a priority for research funding. Humans had different priorities. Their medical teams studied diseases that affected small populations just as seriously as they researched threats to major species. They had developed treatments for dozens of conditions that the Council's main research institutions ignored as unimportant. Governor Praxon's medical staff estimated they had supplies for another 10 days. After that, the plague would resume its deadly spread through the colony's population. He had sent emergency requests to every major pharmaceutical company in Council space. Most had not even bothered to respond. The human companies had not just provided medicine. They had stationed research teams on affected worlds, working directly with local medical staff to develop better treatments and prevention methods. They had trained local doctors in new techniques and helped establish supply chains for long-term care. All of that was gone now, leaving colonies like New Thessaly to face medical crises with whatever resources they could scrape together from an increasingly indifferent council bureaucracy. The problems multiplied across every sector of council space. The Rescue and Recovery Corps, responsible for responding to emergencies in the dangerous Outer Rim territories, found itself completely unable to function. The organization was 90% human-staffed, because most other species considered the work too risky, for too little reward. Humans had volunteered for rescue missions in asteroid fields where one wrong move meant death. They had operated emergency medical stations in regions where pirates and raiders made every supply run a military operation. They had maintained communication, relays in areas so hostile that equipment failed constantly and replacement was nearly impossible. Commander, Thrace of the Thylorian, Space Navy received the first distress call 3 days after. The Corp's human staff disappeared. A passenger ship carrying 300 civilians had suffered engine failure in the Broken Stars region, an area known for gravitational anomalies and debris fields. Under normal circumstances, the Corps would have dispatched 3 rescue ships within hours. The human crews knew the Broken Stars better than anyone and had the experience to navigate the dangerous approach routes. Now Thrace had no one to send. The few non-human rescue specialists were already committed to other emergencies, and none of them had training for the Broken Stars environment. The passenger ship sent increasingly desperate messages as their life support systems began to fail. Thrace could only respond that help was not available. The ship was lost with all hands 2 days later. Similar disasters played out across the Rim territories as the absence of human rescue capabilities left entire regions without emergency services. On the agricultural world of Ceres Prime, farming supervisor Kellyan faced a different kind of crisis. Human agricultural specialists had spent years developing crop rotation systems adapted to the planet's unusual soil conditions. The techniques required precise timing and careful attention to mineral balances that human farmers understood instinctively. Local farmers had learned to follow human guidance, but they did not understand the underlying principles. Without human supervision, the carefully balanced system began to break down. Crop yields dropped by 40% in the first harvest after human departure. Kellyan's projections showed complete agricultural collapse within 2 growing seasons. The same pattern emerged on dozens of agricultural worlds. Humans had developed farming methods for extreme environments that other species could not master. They had created solutions for worlds with unusual gravity, toxic soil, or hostile weather patterns. They had shared this knowledge freely, but they had not trained local populations to continue the work independently. In the council chambers, the investigation committees began presenting their findings. The reports painted a disturbing picture of just how deeply human involvement had penetrated council civilization. Humans operated 60% of the deep space communication relays that connected distant worlds. They maintained the translation software that allowed different species to communicate effectively. They had designed and built much of the infrastructure that made galactic civilization possible. Ambassador Zethkari read through the reports with growing alarm. The humans had never advertised their contributions. They had simply done the work that needed doing, often in dangerous or unpleasant conditions that other species avoided. Council Speaker Morveth called for emergency sessions to address the mounting crises. Representatives from affected worlds demanded immediate action to restore essential services. But the Council had no solutions to offer. The humans had not just provided services. They had provided the knowledge and skills necessary to maintain those services. They had trained local workers, but apparently not enough to maintain operations without human oversight. As the fourth week of human absence ended, even the most dismissive council members could no longer deny the severity of the situation. The humans had not been junior partners in council civilization. They had been essential to its operation in ways that no one had bothered to measure or understand. General Korvex, who had dismissed human withdrawal as childish theatrics, now faced reports that military supply lines were failing without human transport services. Ambassador Lyrian's warnings about the importance of human contribution seemed prophetic rather than alarmist. The council that had voted to limit human influence and restrict their participation in major decisions now discovered that humans had been holding their civilization together in 1,000 quiet ways, and they were all gone. 2 months after the human disappearance, the Galactic Council faced its worst crisis in 1,000 years. System Administrator Jorik stood in the central command center of the Council's primary communication hub, staring at displays that showed red warning lights across half the galaxy. The massive facility, buried deep beneath the Council homeworld's surface, had once hummed with efficient activity. Now it felt like a tomb. The communication arrays connecting distant sectors were failing one by one. The hybrid technology that allowed different species to share information across vast distances required constant maintenance and adjustment. Human technicians had designed most of these systems, combining technologies from dozens of different species into networks that actually worked. Jorik had spent his entire career managing communication protocols, but he was discovering that he understood almost nothing about the actual hardware. The humans had handled all the technical work while he focused on administrative duties. Now, with entire sectors going dark, he realized how dependent the Council had become on human expertise. The translation matrices were the first to fail. These systems allowed species with completely different communication methods to understand each other. Some species communicated through chemical signals, others through electromagnetic patterns, still others through combinations of sound and color that had no equivalent in other languages. Human programmers had spent decades creating software that could bridge these gaps. They had worked with linguists and cultural experts from every species to build systems that translated not just words, but concepts and emotional context. The work required an understanding of dozens of different forms of consciousness and communication. Without human maintenance, the translation systems began producing nonsense. Diplomatic messages became strings of random symbols. Trade negotiations turned into collections of meaningless noise. Emergency communications from distressed colonies arrived as patterns of color and sound that no one could interpret. The breakdown in communication was only the beginning. Across Council space, infrastructure that had seemed solid and reliable began to collapse. The early warning system that detected incoming asteroids and other space hazards went offline completely. Human technicians had maintained a network of sensors and automated defense platforms that protected inhabited worlds from cosmic threats. The system required constant updates as new objects entered tracked space and orbital patterns shifted over time. Without human oversight, the automated systems began making mistakes. Warning signals went out for asteroids that had been harmlessly tracked for years. More dangerously, actual threats went undetected as sensor networks failed to update their data. The colony world of Kepler Station learned about this failure the hard way. A small asteroid struck their primary agricultural dome, destroying 3 months of food production for 50,000 colonists. The impact should have been detected days in advance, giving the colony time to evacuate or deploy defensive measures. Instead, the automated systems had classified the asteroid as a non-threat based on outdated orbital calculations. On the industrial world of Titan's Gate, factory manager Salos watched his production lines shut down one by one. His facility manufactured the medical equipment used throughout Council space, but the assembly systems had been designed by human engineers who understood the complex requirements of different species. The machines needed constant adjustment to switch between products designed for different biological types. Human technicians had programmed the systems with thousands of specifications, accounting for everything from the different atmospheric requirements of various species to the unique materials that different biologies could safely use. Without human operators, the factory could only produce basic components. The sophisticated medical devices that many species depended on were simply beyond the capability of Salos and his staff to manufacture. They had the raw materials and the assembly equipment, but they lacked the knowledge to make the systems work properly. Similar shutdowns occurred across the industrial sector. Human engineers had designed manufacturing processes for extreme conditions that other species found impossible to work in. They had created solutions for zero-gravity construction, high radiation environments, and the unique challenges of building infrastructure on worlds with exotic atmospheric conditions. The loss of manufacturing capability had immediate effects on quality of life throughout Council space. Medical devices became scarce. Replacement parts for critical infrastructure were no longer available. Even basic consumer goods that required complex manufacturing processes disappeared from the market. On the research station orbiting the neutron star designated NX-7, Dr. Valix of the Centauri Republic faced a different kind of disaster. The station's shielding systems, designed to protect researchers from the star's deadly radiation, were failing without human maintenance. Humans had been the only species willing to work on the station. The radiation environment was lethal to most forms of life, but humans could survive long enough in protective suits to perform necessary repairs and maintenance. They had volunteered for the assignment because the research being conducted was important for understanding stellar evolution. Now the shielding was deteriorating, and Dr. Valix had no way to fix it. His research team would have to evacuate within days or face certain death from radiation exposure. Years of important work would be lost, and the station itself would become uninhabitable. The evacuation of NX-7 was just one of dozens of research facilities that had to be abandoned. Humans had staffed research stations in environments that other species considered too dangerous or uncomfortable. They had studied phenomena in the hearts of gas giants, on the surfaces of tidally locked worlds, and in the gravitational fields of black holes. The knowledge gained from these dangerous research projects had advanced understanding of physics, chemistry, and biology for all Council species. Human researchers had made discoveries that benefited everyone, often at great personal risk. Now those research programs were ending. The facilities were being evacuated or simply abandoned. The accumulated knowledge remained, but the ongoing research that could have led to new breakthroughs was simply stopping. In the Council chambers, emergency sessions continued around the clock. Representatives from affected worlds demanded solutions that the Council simply could not provide. The administrative structure that had seemed so impressive and efficient was revealing itself to be largely ceremonial. The real work of maintaining galactic civilization had been done by humans working quietly in dangerous or unpleasant jobs that other species avoided. They had built and maintained the infrastructure that made everything else possible. Ambassador Zethkari found himself appointed to head a task force charged with finding ways to replace human services. The work was frustrating and often impossible. Every investigation revealed new areas where human contributions had been essential. The small species that had looked up to humans as mentors and protectors were suffering the most. The Kepler colonies, populated by small herbivorous beings, had depended on human agricultural techniques to grow food on their marginal worlds. Without human guidance, their crops were failing and famine threatened. The Altair commune, a peaceful species that avoided conflict, had relied on human security services to protect their trade ships from pirates. Now their merchant vessels were being attacked regularly, and they had no way to defend themselves. Even the major species were discovering uncomfortable truths about their dependence on human capabilities. The Draconian Military Union had relied on human technical support for their most advanced weapons systems. The Veltar Confederacy had used human diplomatic services to maintain relationships with species they found culturally incomprehensible. The crisis was not just about missing services. It was about missing knowledge, missing skills, and missing relationships that had taken years to build. The humans had not just performed jobs. They had served as bridges between different forms of life, creating connections that allowed galactic civilization to function. As the third month of human absence began, Council members started to understand that they were not dealing with a temporary problem. The humans had built their involvement in Council civilization so deeply that removing them was like removing the foundation from beneath a building. The structure was still standing, but it was beginning to crumble, and no one knew how to fix it. 6 months after the humans vanished, Council Speaker Morveth authorized the most extensive search operation in galactic history. Admiral Korvash of the Thylorian Deep Space Fleet commanded a task force of 200 ships from 12 different species. Their mission was simple in concept but impossible in practice: find the humans and convince them to return before Council civilization collapsed completely. The search began in human space, the small cluster of systems that Earth had colonized before joining the Council. The results were both fascinating and terrifying. Every human world was empty but not abandoned. The cities remained intact, the infrastructure was still functional, and automated systems continued to operate. But there were no people anywhere. It was as if the entire human population had simply vanished into space. Captain Narex of the search vessel, Deep Current, led the investigation of Earth itself. Her team found something that chilled them to their core. The planet was being maintained by automated systems, but it was clearly being prepared for something. Agricultural areas had been expanded and improved. Manufacturing facilities were producing goods and storing them in massive warehouses. The orbital shipyards were constructing vessels of unknown design, unlike anything in Council databases. Most disturbing of all, the automated systems refused to respond to Council authority codes. They continued their work regardless of who tried to access them. The humans had programmed their home systems to operate independently, with no external control possible. Dr. Moran, the expedition's xenobiologist, studied the evidence with growing unease. They planned this, she reported to Admiral Korvash. This wasn't a spontaneous withdrawal. They prepared for months, maybe years. They automated everything they needed to maintain their worlds without direct supervision. The search expanded to follow the few traces of human movement that could be detected. Long-range sensors had recorded massive fleet movements in the weeks before the humans disappeared from Council space. The fleets had traveled toward the galactic rim, but beyond that, the trail went cold. What the search teams found at the rim changed everything. Scout Captain Thress was the first to detect the anomalies. His ship's sensors picked up energy signatures unlike anything in Council databases. The readings suggested massive industrial activity in regions that should have been empty space. When Thress investigated, he found something that defied belief. Entire star systems had been modified for human habitation. Planets had been terraformed with impossible speed. Artificial worlds had been constructed around stars that barely existed on Council star charts. The technology involved was beyond anything the Council thought humans possessed. The scale of construction suggested industrial capabilities far greater than anything humans had displayed while they were Council members. How did they do this? Thress transmitted back to the task force. These facilities would have taken decades to build using known technology. But we're seeing evidence of construction that happened in months, not years. Admiral Korvash ordered more detailed investigations. What the teams discovered was even more unsettling. The humans had not just built new colonies. They had apparently made contact with other species that the Council had never encountered. The construction showed technological signatures from at least 6 different civilizations, all working together in some kind of alliance. Communications Officer Villani detected scattered transmissions that suggested human fleets were operating in regions far beyond the galactic rim. The humans were not just hiding from the Council. They were actively engaged with civilizations that the Council did not even know existed. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been debating whether to grant humans more representation in their government, the humans had been building relationships with other galactic powers. They had apparently developed capabilities and alliances that made the Council irrelevant to their future plans. Back in Council space, the crisis continued to deepen. Member species were beginning to withdraw from the Alliance as essential services continued to fail. The Kepler colonies had requested emergency food aid from 3 different sources. None had been able to provide adequate help. The small Antaran Republic, a junior member species that had joined the Council, largely because of human encouragement, formally announced their intention to leave the Alliance. Their representative delivered a bitter speech to the Council chamber. Humans taught us that civilization meant helping each other, the Antaran ambassador declared. They showed us how different species could work together for mutual benefit. But this Council has proven that those were human values, not Council values. Without humans, this alliance is just a collection of species competing for advantage. Other junior species began to follow the Antaran example. The Council was losing members almost as fast as it was losing essential services. Ambassador Zethkari found himself leading increasingly desperate diplomatic missions. His job was to convince departing species to remain in the alliance, but he had nothing to offer them. The Council could not provide the services that humans had maintained. They could not offer the protection that humans had provided. They could not even maintain the communication systems that made galactic government possible. The major species were starting to pursue independent solutions to the crisis. The Draconian Military Union began negotiations with the Zerian Empire for a separate defense alliance. The Veltar Confederacy started building their own communication networks, rather than waiting for Council systems to be repaired. General Corvex, who had dismissed human departure as childish theatrics, now found himself facing the collapse of everything he had worked to build. The military cooperation that had maintained peace for decades was fragmenting, as species lost faith in Council leadership. In a closed session of senior representatives, Corvex admitted what everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say, "We cannot function without them. We built our entire civilization around human capabilities, and we never bothered to develop alternatives." The search missions continued to send back disturbing reports. Long-range reconnaissance detected human fleets operating in conjunction with unknown alien forces. The ships were of advanced design, incorporating technologies that suggested rapid advancement in human capabilities. Most concerning of all, the human fleets were not hiding. They were operating openly in regions that bordered Council space, but they made no effort to communicate with Council forces. They simply ignored all attempts at contact. It was as if the humans had moved beyond the Council entirely. They had found other allies, other opportunities, other futures that did not include the species that had once been their partners. The final blow came when long-range sensors detected massive construction projects in the void between galaxies. The energy signatures suggested the building of structures larger than most planets. The humans were not just establishing new colonies. They were building something that dwarfed anything the Council had ever imagined. The search task force had been sent to find humans and convince them to return. Instead, they had discovered that humanity had outgrown the Council entirely. They had found allies more advanced than any Council species. They had developed capabilities that made Council technology look primitive. They had begun projects that operated on scales the Council could barely comprehend. Admiral Corvesh transmitted his final report back to Council headquarters. The humans are not lost. They are not hiding. They have simply moved beyond us. We are no longer relevant to their plans. The message reached the Council chambers as representatives debated yet another emergency measure to address the ongoing collapse of galactic civilization. The debate stopped as the implications of the Admiral's report became clear. The humans had not abandoned the Council because they were angry or hurt. They had abandoned the Council because they had found something better. 1 year after the humans disappeared, a single message arrived at the Council headquarters. The transmission came through communication channels that should not have existed. It bypassed all Council security systems and appeared simultaneously on every active display throughout the chamber. The message was addressed to the Galactic Council, but it carried authentication codes that no Council member recognized. Council Speaker Morveth stood before the assembled representatives as the message played. The voice was human, calm and professional, but there was something different about it. The speaker possessed an authority that had never been present in human council representatives. To the members of the Galactic Council, the message began. This communication serves as formal notification of humanity's withdrawal from all treaties, agreements, and obligations related to council membership. This withdrawal is permanent and non-negotiable. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the usual rustling and shifting that accompanied council sessions stopped as every being focused on the words. The message continued. We feel it is appropriate to explain our decision, as many of you have expressed confusion about our departure. For 12 years, humanity participated in council governance with the belief that we were building something together. We contributed our knowledge, our labor, and our lives to the common good of galactic civilization. Ambassador Zethkari felt his stomach tighten as the human voice continued with devastating precision. During those 12 years, the Council voted against every major human proposal for improving conditions in the Rim territories. The Council rejected our recommendations for increased medical aid to affected populations. The Council denied our requests for better protection of shipping routes serving smaller species. The Council dismissed our warnings about emerging threats to galactic stability. The message paused, and in that silence, every Council member could recall the votes being referenced. At the time, those decisions had seemed reasonable, even wise. Human proposals had often been expensive or risky. They had required resources that could be used for other priorities. We accepted these decisions. The human voice resumed. We believed that democracy meant accepting outcomes even when we disagreed with them. We continued to serve Council interests even when the Council refused to serve the interests we believed were important. General Korvac shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He remembered arguing against human proposals on the grounds that they were too idealistic, too focused on helping species that contributed little to Council prosperity. However, we also continued our own work. While the Council debated and delayed, we provided medical aid to plague-stricken worlds. We maintained rescue services in dangerous regions. We protected shipping routes that the Council considered unimportant. We built relationships with species that the Council ignored. The message's tone remained calm, but there was an underlying strength that none of the Council members had ever heard from human representatives. Through this work, we made a discovery that changed our perspective entirely. The galaxy is much larger and more diverse than the Council realizes. There are civilizations beyond your current knowledge that operate on principles very different from Council governance. We have been welcomed into an alliance that values the contributions we can make. Ambassador Lyrian of the Centauri Republic leaned forward, finally understanding the scope of what had happened. The humans had not just left the Council. They had found alternatives to the Council. Our new alliance operates on the principle that advanced civilizations have obligations to help less advanced ones. Members are expected to contribute their unique capabilities for the common good. Progress is measured not by the prosperity of the strongest members, but by the welfare of the weakest. The words hit the Council chamber like a physical blow. Every principle the human voice described was something that human representatives had argued for during their years in the Council. Every value mentioned was something the Council had rejected as impractical or too expensive. We wish to be clear that our departure was not motivated by anger or resentment. We simply recognized that our values and goals were incompatible with Council priorities. We chose to direct our efforts toward alliance partners who share our commitment to mutual aid and cooperative development. Council Speaker Morveth found his voice. Is communication possible? Can we discuss terms for human return to Council membership? The message continued as if his question had been anticipated. We understand that our departure has created difficulties for Council operations. These difficulties are the natural consequence of building critical infrastructure around the contributions of a member you did not value enough to include in important decisions. The brutal honesty of the statement made several representatives flinch. The humans were not gloating or expressing satisfaction at Council struggles. They were simply stating facts. We are not interested in returning to Council membership. Our alliance offers opportunities for growth and development that exceed anything possible within Council limitations. However, we recognize that our sudden departure created hardships for populations that depended on services we provided. A new tension filled the chamber. Was this leading to an offer of help? Therefore, We are prepared to provide emergency assistance to prevent humanitarian disasters in Council space. Medical supplies for plague-affected worlds will be delivered to neutral stations for Council pickup. Rescue services will be provided for emergency situations in Rim territories. Essential maintenance will be performed on critical infrastructure to prevent system failures. Relief flooded through many representatives, but the human voice was not finished. This assistance is temporary and limited. It will continue for exactly 1 standard year, during which time the Council must develop alternative solutions. After that period, humanity will have no further obligations to Council space or Council populations. The message paused again, and when it resumed, the tone carried a weight that made every being in the chamber pay absolute attention. We also wish to inform the Council that our alliance partners are monitoring the situation in this region. Several alliance members have expressed interest in establishing relationships with Council species that demonstrate compatibility with alliance values. Ambassador Zethkari felt his blood run cold. The humans were not just offering aid. They were offering Council species the opportunity to abandon the Council entirely and join this mysterious alliance. Species interested in alliance membership are welcome to submit applications through the communication protocols being transmitted with this message. Membership requirements include demonstrated commitment to mutual aid, cooperative development, and protection of less advanced civilizations. The implications were staggering. The humans were not just leaving the Council. They were potentially recruiting Council members to leave with them. We bear no ill will toward the Galactic Council or its members. We simply recognize that different civilizations have different values and different goals. We have found our place among the stars, and it is not with the Council. The message began to wind down, but the final statement carried more impact than anything that had come before. To those Council members who supported human proposals and shared human values, you are welcome to apply for alliance membership. Your contributions would be valued by partners who understand the importance of helping others and building inclusive galactic civilization. The message ended with transmission of complex communication protocols and coordinates for alliance contact points. Then the displays went dark, leaving the Council chamber in stunned silence. As the immediate shock wore off, the real implications began to sink in. The humans had not just found a way to leave the Council. They had found a way to make the Council irrelevant. They offered emergency aid that would prevent immediate disasters. But they also offered a pathway for any species that wanted to abandon the Council system entirely. They had built an alternative that promised everything the Council had failed to provide. Within hours, the first applications for alliance membership began arriving from junior Council species. The Antaran Republic, which had already announced its intention to leave the Council, submitted a formal request to join the Human Alliance. The Kepler colonies followed within days. Even some senior species began private communications with Alliance representatives. The promised values of mutual aid and cooperative development appealed to populations that had grown tired of Council politics and endless debates. The Galactic Council, which had dismissed human contributions as expendable, now faced the possibility that the humans had built something better. They had created an alliance that offered everything the Council claimed to provide, but actually delivered on its promises. As representatives filed out of the chamber, many were already calculating whether their own species might be better served by abandoning the Council and joining the Human Alliance. The humans had left quietly, without threats or ultimatums. But in leaving, they had created an alternative that threatened the very existence of the civilization that had failed to value them. The Council's choice was simple: learn to function without humans, or face the gradual departure of every member that shared human values. The humans had won by walking away.